All right, so let's dive into this Hunter Biden pardon
Okay.
by his father, President Joe Biden. Now, the pardon itself is pretty interesting,
Yeah.
but what's got people talking is what it says about the American clemency
All
system
right.
as a whole. And we've got some fascinating source material here to kind of dig into. One of them is an article by David Vogel.
Okay.
Okay, he's a LinkedIn influencer.
Yeah.
And he's got a very personal and some might say controversial
Right.
take on this whole situation.
Yeah, what I think is so interesting about Vogel's article is that he uses this Hunter Biden pardon
Yeah.
as a springboard
Ah.
to discuss his own experience seeking clemency.
Yeah.
And he claims actual innocence. And the circumstances surrounding his case are pretty compelling, to say the least.
Yeah, before we get into Vogel's story, I think it's important to just kind of set the stage here a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, there are currently over 10,520 clemency petitions
Wow.
sitting on President Biden's desk.
That's a lot.
I mean, that's a massive backlog.
Yeah.
And it really underscores the scope of this issue.
Yeah, it's a staggering number. I mean, just imagine all those individual stories, like all the hopes and fears of thousands of people just waiting for a decision that could really alter their lives. So this backlog, it raises all sorts of questions about the effectiveness and fairness of the entire clemency process itself.
Absolutely. And so it's against this backdrop, right, that the Hunter Biden pardon has sparked so much debate. What are your thoughts on the decision itself?
Well, I mean, it's undeniably complex, right? I mean, you have the personal element here. It's, a father pardoning his son.
Right.
And I think that's a situation that, that a lot of people can relate to on a very personal level,
Sure.
regardless of what their political stance is. However, it also raises these concerns about potential favoritism.
Yeah.
And whether justice is truly blind when it comes to people with, power and influence.
Yeah. Vogel seems to really tap into that tension. He argues that if Hunter Biden deserved clemency, then shouldn't the thousands of others waiting, should they also deserve consideration?
Yeah. Vogel basically uses the Hunter Biden case to highlight what he sees as a broken system and, argues that this sheer number of pending petitions indicates a failure to uphold that principle of equal justice for all.
And this is where Vogel's personal story comes in. He reveals in his article that he's also filed for clemency,
Interesting.
claiming that he is actually innocent
Oh, wow.
of the charges that were against him. And what I thought was particularly interesting was he claims that he sought legal counsel
Okay.
to make sure that he was operating within the law before engaging in the business practices that led to his charges.
So he's saying that he did his due diligence, made sure he was on the up and up.
Right. And get this. He claims that at the time, the government had a website that endorsed those practices as legal.
So he consulted with, legal experts.
Right.
And then the government turns around and prosecutes him for actions that they had previously deemed acceptable.
That's exactly what he's saying. And what's even more striking is that he alleges that after his attorney contacted the government to ask about this discrepancy, they just went silent,
Wow.
took down the website, and then proceeded to prosecute him for those same actions.
That's a pretty serious accusation. If that's true, it really raises questions about due process.
Right.
And the potential for the government to arbitrarily change the rules. I mean, it does.
Yeah, it's interesting. He draws a parallel
Yeah.
between his situation and Donald Trump's claims of political persecution. And, if both of those situations are accurate, then it certainly fuels distrust in the justice system
Yeah.
and raises concerns about its misuse for political purposes.
Yeah, it's a very provocative comparison for sure. So he's basically saying that if the government can just change the rules on a whim, as he is alleging, where does that leave the average citizen? I mean, it kind of sounds like a conspiracy thriller or something.
It does. But before we get too swept up in the intrigue,
Yeah.
we need to look at the evidence that he's presenting and examine the nuances of his argument.
Totally. Let's dive into it.
All right. So let's shift our focus to his actual clemency petition itself.
Okay.
What exactly is he alleging? And what kind of evidence is he presenting to support these claims?
So Vogel's petition is it's a really interesting read.
Okay.
He outlines his case in a very methodical way, and he doesn't shy away from strong language.
He certainly doesn't. He uses phrases like ethical atrocity and mind-bendingly unfair to describe his experience, which definitely grabs your attention. But beyond that, beyond just the emotional appeal, what kind of concrete evidence does he actually offer?
Yeah. Well, he includes a lot of documentation
Okay.
in his petition, including legal precedents, correspondence with government officials, and even screenshots of that now defunct government website that he claims endorsed the very business practices that he was prosecuted for.
So he's not just relying on his word.
No.
He's actually trying to build a factual case.
He is.
To support these claims.
Yes.
That's interesting. So what exactly does he claim happened? And how does he connect it to these broader issues around clemency and this potential for abuse within the system?
So he starts by outlining his background as a LinkedIn influencer and advocate for ethical leadership, which makes his prosecution all the more ironic and unjust. Right. According to him. And he claims that he went to great lengths to make sure that his business practices were legal. He even hired a well-respected attorney, Douglas Grover, to advise him. And Grover has a reputation as a former mob fighter.
So he's trying to say that he's not some shady character operating in the shadows.
Exactly.
He's someone who genuinely believed that he was doing everything by the book.
That's right. And so he argues that this commitment to ethical conduct makes the government's actions all the more egregious. He claims that after his attorney contacted the government to try to clarify, is this legal or not, they not only failed to provide a clear answer, but they took down that website.
Wow.
That had seemingly endorsed those very practices.
It's like they were trying to erase.
It does seem that way.
Any evidence.
Yeah.
That they had approved of what he was doing.
It does, yeah.
At any point.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what he's saying is this proves that the government knew his actions weren't illegal at the time, but they decided to change the rules after the fact to target him.
Yeah, and this is where he makes that parallel to Donald Trump, right?
Right, yeah.
He's arguing that both of these cases show how the justice system can be weaponized against individuals for political purposes.
And I think he even had a line in his petition that said, if you think Donald Trump's story is one of political persecution, you need to read mine.
Wow.
It's a bold move. Some might say it's a risky move.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the level of outrage that he feels about what happened to him.
Yeah, it definitely does. But we do need to be clear that, drawing parallels to a controversial figure like Trump doesn't automatically validate Vogel's claims, right?
Yeah.
We still need to examine the evidence and assess the merits of his case independently.
Absolutely. It's really crucial to approach this with a critical eye.
Yeah.
And not let our opinions of Trump, whether they're positive or negative, cloud our judgment of Vogel's situation.
I agree.
Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into the evidence he presents. What specifically does he point to as proof that the government changed the rules and targeted him unfairly?
So he points to several key points. First, he emphasizes that the government never actually said that his business practices were illegal before they charged him.
So they never came out and said, hey, this is not legal.
Right. They went silent after his attorney inquired and then removed the website.
So he's saying they essentially moved the goalpost after he'd already taken a shot?
Exactly. And he claims that this is not just unfair, but a fundamental violation of his rights.
And to support his argument, he cites a quote from Justice Scalia, who once said, it is unfair to prosecute a man for a crime that wasn't defined until after the judicial decision that sent him to jail.
That's a pretty powerful quote.
Right.
And it lends a lot of weight to his argument if the circumstances actually line up. But we need to remember that this is just one side of the story, right? We haven't heard the government's perspective on this yet.
Right, of course. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we're only privy to Vogel's account of events at this point.
Right.
But he has made his petition public, and he's actually actively calling for a review of his case. So it seems like he's pretty confident in the strength of his evidence.
Yeah, he's putting it all out there.
Yeah. And he's not just asking for a pardon for himself, right? He's using his platform to advocate for broader clemency reform.
He is, yeah. What's he asking for?
So he's pushing for a more transparent and accountable system, one that prioritizes fairness and consistency. And he argues that the current clemency process is just too arbitrary and too susceptible to political influence.
So he's asking President Biden to live up to his campaign promise to address that massive backlog of clemency petitions and to make the system more just for everybody.
Yeah, and he uses some powerful imagery to make his point. He invokes the legacy of Abraham Lincoln, who was known for his compassion and his willingness to grant clemency to those that he believed deserved a second chance.
Interesting.
He cites Lincoln's pardon of a young soldier who deserted out of fear during the Civil War. And Lincoln's trust in him was later vindicated when the young man actually distinguished himself in battle. So Vogel seems to be drawing a parallel here to his own case, saying that he also deserves a second chance.
But he's not just asking for, for mercy for himself.
Right.
He's arguing that the whole clemency system
Needs an overhaul.
needs a complete overhaul, a shift away from a, purely punitive approach to one that recognizes the potential for rehabilitation and redemption.
He's calling for a more humane and compassionate approach to justice, one that recognizes the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, even those who have made mistakes.
I like it. It's a powerful message.
Yeah.
And it certainly resonates with, with this growing movement for criminal justice reform. But whether Vogel's personal story will be enough to spark meaningful change, that remains to be seen.
It does. And that's a question we're going to continue to explore as we delve deeper into his case and the broader implications of his claims. But before we do that, let's take a moment and kind of step back and consider the perspective of all the thousands of other individuals whose clemency petitions are currently languishing in that backlog.
Yes.
What are their stories? And what does this delay mean for them and their lives?
That's a crucial point. It's easy to get caught up in the drama of these individual cases, like Vogel's or Hunter Biden's.
Of course.
But we can't forget about, the countless others who are also seeking mercy and hoping for a second chance.
Their voices deserve to be heard as well.
They do, yeah.
And I think that's something that Vogel would agree with.
Yeah.
His fight for clemency is not just about his own freedom.
Right.
It's about shining a light on a system that he believes is broken and advocating for a more just and compassionate approach to justice for everyone.
Absolutely. His story, whether you agree with him or not, is a really powerful reminder that the fight for justice is often a long and tough one, but it's a fight worth having. It
is. So let's move on now to explore the human side of this issue. We'll delve into the stories of some of those who are waiting for clemency. We'll examine the challenges that they face, and we'll consider what their experiences tell us about the state of the American justice system.
Sounds good. As we talk about all these clemency petitions and the people behind them, it's easy to get lost in the numbers. But, it's crucial to remember that each petition actually represents a human life, a story filled with hopes, dreams, mistakes, and the yearning for a second chance.
Right. Yeah. We can't lose sight of that human cost of these legal battles and the impact that it has on individuals and families.
For sure. So let's shift gears a little bit and try to connect with that human element. I've been looking through some of these publicly available clemency petitions, and there are some, there's some truly heartbreaking stories.
Yeah. What kind of stories are we talking about? What are some of the common themes that you're seeing?
Well, a lot of them involve, nonviolent drug offenses, often stemming from, addiction struggles.
Right.
And you see people that, were caught up in the war on drugs. They receive these harsh mandatory minimum sentences. And now, years later, they're expressing deep remorse and they're demonstrating remarkable rehabilitation.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that, the justice system isn't always about black and white. There's shades of gray, there's extenuating circumstances, and there's that potential for growth and transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where this concept of mercy comes in.
Right.
Clemency offers a way to, to acknowledge that people can change, that they can make amends for their past mistakes, and that they deserve a chance to, to reintegrate into society as productive citizens.
But there's a real tension there, right, between the need for accountability and the possibility of redemption.
Definitely. And I think that tension is really at the heart of the clemency debate.
Yeah.
How do we balance, the need to uphold the law, but also this recognition that people that people are capable of change? It's a hard question to answer.
It is, and it's even more complicated when you factor in those political dimensions of clemency, as we saw with the Hunter Biden case.
Right, exactly. When clemency decisions are perceived as, influenced by politics, it undermines public trust in the fairness and impartiality of the justice system.
For sure. And that brings us back to Vogel and his claim that he was unfairly targeted.
Yeah.
He's essentially arguing that his case is an example of how the system can be manipulated for political ends.
Right, that's a serious accusation. But, whether or not his claims are actually true, his case has definitely reignited this whole debate uh, about the role of clemency in our justice system and really the criteria that should, guide these decisions.
Okay, so let's dive back into the specifics of Vogel's case.
Okay.
He's saying that the government basically changed the rules of the game after he had already played by them. What evidence does he actually have to support that?
So he really focuses on that government website that he consulted before, engaging in those business practices
Right.
that led to the charges against him. And he's got screenshots of the website which, appear to actually endorse those practices as legal.
So he's saying he's got this official documentation for the government that basically said, hey, what you're doing is permissible.
That's what he's saying. And he argues that, them taking the website down after his attorney inquired
Yep.
is proof that they were trying to, cover their tracks.
Yeah, it definitely raises questions about why they would take the website down. If it had inaccurate or outdated information, wouldn't it make more sense to update it or to leave it up and put a disclaimer or something like that to completely remove it?
That's a good point. And it's one of the, it's one of the key pieces of evidence that he's using to back up his claim that there was this deliberate attempt to mislead him and then to prosecute him, based on rules that didn't exist anymore.
So he's saying the government basically pulled a bait and switch.
I mean, that's one way to put it, yeah. But it does kind of capture the essence of his argument.
Well,
He's saying that he was lured into a false sense of security by their own website, and then he was penalized for actions that they had previously said were acceptable.
okay, so it's a compelling narrative, but we got to be careful about jumping to conclusions. We still haven't heard, the government side of the story.
Of course. We got to remember we're only seeing Vogel's side of it right now.
Mhm.
Right.
We don't know, the full context of their actions or their reasons for taking down the website.
But, regardless of whether Vogel's claims end up being true, this case has definitely ignited this broader conversation
Yeah, let's-
about the potential for abuse within the clemency system.
Absolutely. And it's a conversation we need to be having. If a system that's, designed to offer mercy and second chances
Right.
can be manipulated the way that he's alleging,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. That demands attention.
It does. And it just erodes public trust in the justice system as a whole. If people believe that the rules can just be changed and that individuals can be unfairly targeted, it undermines the very foundation of a just society.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So what do we do? I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that clemency is not a black and white issue.
Right. It's complex, it's nuanced, it's deeply personal, and we need to approach it with humility, with open-mindedness, recognizing that there are often valid arguments on both sides.
Yeah, I think we also have to be willing to challenge our own assumptions and biases. We all come to this issue with preconceived notions, and those notions are shaped by our own experiences, our own worldviews.
Of course.
And it's important to acknowledge those biases.
Yeah.
And to be open to hearing perspectives that might be different from our own.
I think it's crucial to center the conversation around, those human stories.
Right.
We need to listen to the voices of the people that have been, directly impacted by the clemency process, to hear about their struggles, their hopes, their fears.
Yeah, those stories can help us understand, the human cost of these decisions,
Right.
the complexity of this system, and really the real need for reform.
Absolutely. And we have to move beyond those simplistic narratives that are often presented in the media. We have to dig deeper into the nuances of each case to understand, the context, the legal arguments,
Right.
the individual circumstances.
Yeah. It's about moving away from just those knee-jerk reactions and sound bites and moving towards a more informed and compassionate understanding of clemency.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that understanding has to be, grounded in a shared commitment to justice, fairness, and the rule of law. Clemency should never be about political favors or personal agendas. It should be about making sure that justice is served in a way that's fair, equitable, and humane.
It's about recognizing that people can change, that they can make amends for their past, and that they deserve a chance at redemption.
For sure. And it's about creating a system that balances, accountability with compassion that upholds the law, but also, also recognizes the human capacity for growth and transformation.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into clemency,
Yeah.
I think the most important takeaway here is that this isn't just a legal or a political issue.
Right.
It's a human issue.
Yeah.
It's about people's lives, their hopes, their dreams, their very futures.
It really is. And it's a conversation that demands our attention, demands our engagement, and demands our commitment to creating a more just and a more compassionate society.
We encourage you to keep exploring this topic,
Hmm.
to read David Vogel's clemency petition, to learn about the stories of others who are seeking mercy,
Yeah.
and to engage in a thoughtful and respectful dialogue about the role of clemency in our justice system.
Remember, change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a collective commitment to building a better world.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring this complex and important issue.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep seeking understanding, and keep the conversation going.
It's fascinating how clemency often becomes this lightning rod issue in the media. It seems like every time a president grants a pardon or commutes a sentence, it sparks all this debate and controversy.
Yeah, it's true. Clemency decisions, I think they really tap into some deeply held beliefs you know, about justice, fairness, and the role of government. It's not just about those legal technicalities. It's about our collective values and what we believe makes a just and compassionate society.
Yeah, and the media plays a huge role in shaping those perceptions, right? I mean, the way a story is framed, the language that's used, the voices that are amplified, it all influences how the public understands and reacts to these decisions.
Absolutely. The media has so much power to humanize or to demonize, to simplify or to sensationalize. It can either foster a nuanced understanding of how complex clemency is, or it can just reduce it to this really simplistic narrative of, good guys versus bad guys.
Yeah, and those narratives, they often get caught up in the political polarization that's so prevalent these days. It seems like every clemency decision is just viewed through this partisan lens where one side is praising it as this act of mercy and then the other side is, condemning it as this blatant abuse of power.
Yeah, you see that play out all the time. And it makes it really difficult to have a reasoned and productive conversation about clemency. We get so bogged down in all the political back and forth that we lose sight of those human stories at the heart of it all.
Right. It's like we forget that these are real people with real lives and their fates are hanging in the balance.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in all the political theater that we forget about the human cost.
Mhm. And that's why it's so important to bring it back to those individual stories like David Vogel's. His case, regardless of, where you stand on the specifics of his claims, it really highlights that human dimension of clemency. It reminds us that these decisions have profound consequences for real people.
Right. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about, the potential for bias and inconsistency within the system. If Vogel's allegations are true, it suggests that the government can manipulate the rules and target individuals unfairly, and that erodes public trust in the entire legal system.
Exactly, and that erosion of trust, it has these ripple effects throughout society. It fuels cynicism, it breeds resentment, and it makes it so much harder to address any of the other challenges that we face as a nation.
So where do we go from here? How do we move beyond, all the political polarization and the media hype to actually have a more meaningful and productive conversation about clemency?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that clemency is not a black and white issue. It's complex, it's nuanced, it's deeply personal, and we need to approach it with a spirit of humility and open-mindedness, recognizing that there are often valid arguments to be made on both sides.
Yeah, and we also have to be willing to challenge our own assumptions and biases. We all come to this topic with preconceived notions shaped by our own experiences and our own worldviews. And it's important to acknowledge those biases and to be open to hearing perspectives that are different from our own.
And I think it's crucial to center the conversation around those human stories. We need to listen to the voices of the people that have been directly impacted by the clemency process, to hear about their struggles, their hopes, their fears.
Right. Yeah. Their stories can help us understand, the human cost of these decisions, the complexity of the system, and the very real need for reform.
And we need to move beyond those simplistic narratives that we often see in the media. We need to delve deeper to understand the context, the legal arguments, the individual circumstances.
Right. It's about moving away from those knee-jerk reactions and sound bites
Yeah.
and moving towards a more informed and compassionate understanding of clemency.
Yeah, I think the understanding has to be grounded in a shared commitment to justice, fairness, and the rule of law. Clemency should never be about, political favors or personal agendas. It should be about ensuring that justice is served in a way that's fair, that's equitable, and that's humane.
Right. It's about recognizing that people can change, that they can make amends for their past mistakes, and
Yeah.
that they deserve a chance at redemption.
And it's about creating a system that balances accountability with compassion, that upholds the law while also recognizing, the human capacity for growth and transformation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into clemency, I think the most important takeaway is that this isn't just a legal or political issue. This is a human issue. It's about people's lives, their hopes, their dreams, their very futures.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a conversation that demands our attention, it demands our engagement, and it demands our commitment to creating a more just and compassionate society.
We encourage you to continue exploring this topic, to read David Vogel's clemency petition, to learn about the stories of others who are seeking mercy, and to engage in thoughtful and respectful dialogue about the role of clemency in our justice system.
Remember, change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a collective commitment to building a better world.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring this complex and important issue.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep seeking understanding, and keep the conversation